First topic, AWS Cloud Security Service. Shared responsibility model, AWS Identity and Access Management, AWS Organization, Compliance, Application Security, then additional security services that we have in AWS. Then if we have time, we're going to look at the knowledge check. The shared responsibility model. Who is responsible for the infrastructure that you created or migrated to the cloud?
C.
So the person or the people that is responsible for the infrastructure that you created or migrated to the cloud is both you, the customer, and the AWS, the service provider. So that leads us to what is called a shared responsibility model. So what is shared responsibility model? Well, let me bring back a diagram that we've used in previous class. If you remember this diagram, it gives us different level or layers that your VM stands on, the different layers that we have in order to have access to our VM or that our VM is created on. VM also is the same thing. I mean, EC2, AWS, EC2 instance. It's also a VM. So when you go to AWS EC2 instance and spin up a server, this is what it is staying on. This is what's everything that makes it possible for that VM to be able to run successfully. So we have the hardware, which comprises the processor, the storage, the network, and other components. Then on top of the hardware, we have our operating system. Then we have the hypervisor. And on top of the hypervisor, that's where we install our VM or we launch our VM. This diagram, I'm going to add to it. And what I'm adding to it is called the global infrastructure. Because not only this you need to worry about when we talk about security, you also need to worry about where the physical server is located before you can even talk about the physical server itself. So for the global infrastructure, we have the region. And inside that region, we also need to cater for the availability zone. And we can extend our region with local zone. So now, everything here is what we need to cater for when we talk about security. And this leads us to what is called security of the cloud and security in the cloud. So when we are talking about security of the cloud, we're talking about the physical and network security of the data center. You know, cloud is also a data center somewhere. It's just that it is not the data center that we own, another person owns it. So that physical data center and the networking of multiple data centers together, or the components of the data center, they need to be secure. And the data center itself, the physical server, that is the hardware and the other physical components, they also need to be secure. So we also need to talk about security of those hardware and the physical servers in the data center. And then we also need to talk about the security of the host operating systems. And then the security of the hypervisor, which is the virtual machine that makes the system to be compatible with hypervisor, with virtualization, which is the security of the virtualization infrastructure. All of these security components are the responsibility of the AWS, which is AWS responsibility. They are responsible for making sure that the physical data center is in a good place, not in a flooded area. They ensure there is camera everywhere. They ensure the place is cool so that our system will not get hacked. They ensure that the physical operating system, the host operating system is secure and dispatched at the regular time. They ensure that the hypervisor is also secure, because if our hypervisor is compromised, it will affect the host server, and it can also affect our VM. So AWS has to make sure that all these are secure and they're responsible for them. So all this is what we refer to as security of the cloud. Then this is not all. We also have the upper part, which you need to ensure that the guest operating system is secured. The access to the instance is also guaranteed and secure. The data and the application that is running on the instance, they are also secure. And finally, access to the account itself are secure and well managed. All of these are the responsibility of the customer. And this is what we refer to as security in the cloud. Several times, people have been asked this in an interview. What do you understand by security of the cloud and security in the cloud? So when somebody asks you security of the cloud, then you need to give them this. And this is what we have as security in the cloud. And this is what is security of the cloud. Security of the cloud is the responsibility of the AWS, which is the service provider. And security in the cloud is the responsibility of the customer. When we talk about security of the cloud, which is the AWS responsibility, where AWS can use whatever they want to ensure their own part of the security, which we are not going to go in there. But they always provide some documentation, some information about what they are doing to ensure that all these parts, which is their own responsibility, are secure and they are on top of their game. But you, the customer, you need to also protect your own part of the cloud, which is security in the cloud. And that is why we are studying cloud security, to know what to use and how to secure the security, our part of the cloud. So for the customer part of the cloud, this is what we do, or what the customer needs to have in place to make sure that they are also ensuring the security of their own part. The client-side data encryption, they need to have data, the client-side data encryption. Before they send the data at all to the cloud, they need to ensure that the data is encrypted and it is secure. When they are sending the data to the cloud, which is going to pass through some network, they also need to make sure that the network traffic is protected, which is network traffic protection. Because the data they have from the cloud, they have to send it to the cloud. So they need to make sure that the tunnel or the networking, the passage is secure. And finally, they also need to ensure that there is server-side encryption. So this is like you, when you want to send your data, maybe you want to send data to somebody in Texas. First thing you need to do is that, let's say you want to send some money, or let's say gift. You need to put that gift in a secure container and seal it so that it's not going to be making sound and fall out from the box. So you need to seal the box. So this is like the client-side encryption. Then you are going to send it to somebody in Texas. You need to make sure that your courier service are secure. You can't just take your service and your package and just throw it on the road for somebody or just give it to a company that is not reliable. You have to use a reliable company like FedEx, like USPS, like UPS, and things like that. So you need to make sure that the networking, how the package is going to get to where it's going to, is also secure. And that's what we refer to as the network traffic protection. Then finally, here, see under the networking side, the first part, you also need that when the data gets to the data and to the place where it's going to, the person also make sure the package is secure. So when we talk about cloud, when you have your package or your data, you send it, making sure that the networking is secure. And when the data also gets to AWS, you also want to make sure that it is encrypted on the AWS side, this is what we normally refer to as encryption at rest. And this is called encryption in transit. Encryption in transit. So this is the first layer of security that you need to ensure. Then that is not all. We also have the guest operating system. You know, when you want to create an EC2 instance, you have to select an operating system. You have to download all the applications on that operating system, and you need to start running it. Maybe your website too, you need to download it. All those also need to be secured. You need to ensure that the guest operating system is secure. The networking, how your web server is talking to your database, they are encrypted, or how your web server is sending data to EBS or is sending data to S3. All those networking or communication also need to be secured. And how your end users are also talking to your application. You need to have your application behind the firewall. And you can see we discussed several, at least 2 types of firewall in AWS. We talk about network access control list and we talk about security group. Then those are not all. Your application or the platform and how people access your application, which are when we talk about the access to your application can either come from your employer, your employee, or your coworker, or your customers or service provider. So all those people that need access to your application, they also need to come in a secure way, and their access to need to be secure. And the customers, which are sending their data to your infrastructure or to your website, to your database, those customer data also need to be secured. All of these are what we call the data security. So before we proceed, I need to arrange this. This is just a very brief knowledge check. Settings, permissions for Amazon S3 objects. Whose responsibility is that? Is it Amazon or you, the customer? Settings permission for Amazon S3 objects.
Customer.
That's the customer's responsibility. Implement physical physical security control at data center.
AWS.
I believe we don't have only one person in the class. I think okay. Maintaining servers that runs Amazon EC2 instance. Who's responsible?
Yes.
Patching software on Amazon EC2 instance. The software that is running on Amazon EC2 instance.
Customer.
That's the customer. Maintain network infrastructure that runs AWS cloud.
AWS.
Service provider.
Yeah. Configure security groups on Amazon EC2.
Customer.
So this is just to tell you that your security or your AWS security does not only come from you alone or come from Amazon. Both of you need to be responsible for this. And you can take this more in a more complex way, or maybe when we get to the solution architect, there is one third party that we normally add to this case. It's not only you or AWS alone. At times, we call some people service provider. And this is under the advanced service provider, or let me call them third party service provider. So the customer can be using some third-party service provider on AWS, because AWS have what is called AWS Marketplace. And in that marketplace, there are a lot of vendors that AWS have vet them and they have certified them to promote their service on AWS cloud. So you customer, if you go and use those services that are provided by third party, then the third party too need to make sure their own part of that service is also secure. So that is not AWS responsibility or you, it is the people, the provider, the third party service provider, normally called the vendors, need to make sure that their service is secure. But in general, what we see out there most is just that, the services of the cloud is between you and the AWS. But that is true, but not always true. Now, the fun part, and one of the most interesting parts and most useful parts of the AWS is identity and access management.